Okay, welcome everyone to another edition, our 25th edition of the Data Resilience SpectrumCast. It's like an anniversary here for us. Joined always, as with my co-host, Randy Arsenault. Morning, Randy.
Happy anniversary, Steve.
And then we have Tricia and Sean, our subject matter experts. How you guys doing?
Good. Happy anniversary, everybody.
And we are joined today by our illustrious guest, Juan Carlo. Juan, how you doing, man?
Good. I'm doing well. Thanks for inviting me.
Oh, thanks for joining us. So the big reason we're having Juan Carlo join us today is specifically because we want to talk about a solution that IBM has been delivering in the field called the CRAT, or the Cyber Resiliency Assessment Tool. And part of the reason why we wanted to do this, obviously this is a data resilience podcast. We've been talking about data resilience over the course of the last year or so, but specific to cyber incidents, we've done a lot of thinking and put a lot of effort behind making sure we can help clients understand their exposure in the field, and this tool is one of them. And Juan Carlo happens to be the expert behind this tool. So why don't I start talking? And Juan Carlo, why don't you tell us a little bit about the CRAT, what it is, and we'll get into a little bit around the delivery and what it looks like after that.
Sure. Yeah. No, thank you. And I would like to give a quick overview of what the assessment is like, how it became what it is, and pretty much what the objectives are and outcomes that we expect from it. And as a quick summary, a lot of the assessment itself is based on the NIST Cyber Resiliency Framework, NIST being the National Institute of Standards and Technology, and it being a framework that a lot of federal entities are required to follow, and then a lot of public entities choose to follow because of how good it is, right? So we pretty much took what they were doing for resiliency and for security and adapted it to storage. We started adding storage-specific questions on top of the questions that were already there to give it that focus. I mean, that's what we do here, storage. So we wanted to put emphasis in those areas, and we noticed there was a gap in those because the assessment didn't really cover those as deep as we would like. So we looked at the NIST framework as well as different other frameworks for cybersecurity and cyber resiliency and put them all together into this one, right? We got rid of some questions that we thought weren't as relevant, and we added storage ones. And the whole purpose of the assessment was to help our clients identify, where they're at in their environment, what their maturity levels are for cyber resiliency. It helps us identify what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are, and if there's any gaps in the environment. That allows us to pretty much tailor our conversations with our customers and, give them solutions and best practices that are based on what they need, right? Not on us just coming up with what we think they need, but based on their environment itself. So it's very tailored, very specific to each customer. And, customer feedback is always great.
Part of what we like to do here is to make sure the solution we're delivering, this is a heterogeneous solution. We can walk into any environment. Doesn't have to be, this isn't specific to IBM, right?
No, correct. This is completely vendor neutral. Even if you don't have any IBM in the environment, this works just as well. So it's great as a tool to engage prospects, existing customers, really anybody, and it's really helping them out as well. So it turns out to be a great win-win for both.
So do you want to perhaps maybe give us some examples of maybe some of the questions that we ask so that clients might get an understanding of kind of the approach that we take here?
Sure. So when going through the questions, right, the questions are going to be divided between the 5 different NIST categories: identify, detect, respond, and recover. And while going through those, every one of those has a smaller category assigned to it. And that's how pretty much we map the questions of the assessment to the potential gaps and how we end up recommending solutions. But some of the questions that come up very often and usually gets everybody thinking and gets us to deeper conversations, I have highlighted here, so I'll go through some of them. So for example, it could be as basic as backups being stored on separate devices from production, right? That's something very very simple to do, and can have a big impact, especially for resiliency. You don't want to have your production next to your testing or even close, right? Especially not on the same device. We of course go through RPOs, RTOs, make sure we have those set up. We use them as KPIs for our resiliency strategy. We can go deeper into those and look at the different tiers that we have in the environment and the different RPO and RTO requirements for those. that usually helps us and the customer identify, what kind of technology they need to meet those requirements. Another big one that we see, and it's very common, that is not currently being used, but it's probably our biggest recommendation, is air gapping, right? And air gap can be a very, very broad term that could be, interpreted many ways. The way we see it is that the true air gap would be through tape, right? Putting your archive in tape and then moving that off-site, right? That's what we consider true air gap. There's different ways to achieve an air gap solution. We could do it through a cloud object storage, through logical air gap with leveraging Spectrum Protect or Protect Plus, many different ways. And, that usually helps us, find a good fit for the customer and then apply it to their environments to keep them protected, mostly from ransomware right now is the big one.
So that's kind of interesting to hear. Steve and I often get into philosophical debates about what air gapping actually means, and I'm on your side. I believe physical air gapping is air gapping. I mean, you can logically air gap, and that's relevant, but the highest level of protection and prevention is always going to be physical air gap, and that's tape, offsite, ideally. So
yeah, no, I agree. That's the true air gap, but it depends on what the customer is looking for, what they need, and what their requirements. Again, RTOs, RPOs. So our job here is to figure out what the best fit is and how we can get to a solution that works. And if we can recommend tape, I'm all for it. I think that's the best thing to do.
So what I was going to say is, I mean, air gap is a cool catchphrase, right? That people like to use to describe a layer of protection. But all of these things are risk reward decisions on behalf of the person, right? I mean, I'll give you even better than an air gap. You just use an old IBM selector typewriter like the Kremlin does, right? And and store it in a safe, and I guarantee you nobody's ever gonna interrupt it.
Or you just write it, like, I don't know.
Or you write it with a pen, right?
You write it on paper, yeah.
But that's an unreasonable thing. So you have to judge here what are your risks are, what are your costs, and what are you willing to do to mitigate those costs, right? And so I'm assuming that you're providing options to people, right? Not just making a straight out you should do this type of thing.
Correct. Yeah, and typically it's very interesting with that when that comes up, and of course the customer's worried about ransomware, potential malware in their environments, and they're interested in air gap. One of our follow-ups is usually an air gap workshop where we pretty much bring the client in with a lot of our specialists, our SMEs, the best of the best. We listen to the customer, right? That's the first step. We listen in what the customer situation is, what's in their environments, and what their goals are. And then from there, we go through our possible solutions, what we think as experts would be a good fit for them. What can we offer? For example, we cover DS8, safeguarded copy. We can go through Protect, CDM, cloud object storage, tape, and we kind of figure out what the customer needs based on their requirements and what would be a good fit and a good price balance, right, based on their risk tolerance.
Right.
So how do you engage this tool, this assessment?
So it's actually very simple. The customer only needs to reach out to whoever's in charge of their account from the IBM side, that being a client exec or a client rep, and pretty much reach out to me and schedule a time to do this. It's fairly simple to complete. It only takes about 2 hours to go through the questions, and we can pretty much right after we finish them give some sample results, kind of look at what the assessment is pointing to. But then after that, we like to schedule a follow-up meeting to go over our final reports where we go over our observations, any best practices that we recommend, any potential solutions that might be a good fit, and figure out next steps, right? Like that air gap workshop. But it could be any sort of workshop.
Yeah, so like on your workshop agenda, I saw some really smart people. What does the IBM rep need to know? And is this also open for BPs? Can they also engage you?
Yeah, absolutely. This is open for IBMers, customers, the BPs, anybody that's interested on it can just reach out either to me or Steve or really anybody on our team to complete one of these, and we'll set everything up and get the customer taken care of. Yes.
Do you find that clients, when they go through an initial assessment, do they then want to get on like a like a health check program where maybe periodically they'll come back in and reevaluate based on new threats or emerging threats, or I don't know, shifts in technology? Do you offer that, number one? And number two, do you find that people are interested in that?
Yeah, of course, especially brand new clients. Usually the assessment brings so much to the table in terms of what to do next, or how to follow up, or how to get started on that resiliency journey. That yes, a lot of our customers either choose to have a repeating meeting or meet with our TAs, or our client success managers. Really, I mean, it could go anywhere from there. Just depends on what the customer answered on the assessment and what we can tailor to them.
And do you have any good war stories you can share with us?
That was going to be my question.
Beat you to it.
Yeah, of course. We actually had a recent great engagement from one of a big insurance company that pretty much was already engaged with IBM. They had a couple RFPs on the table that they were still trying to decide on. And a big concern of theirs was ransomware, which is kind of what triggered the assessment in the first place. And they wanted to learn more about resiliency, how to get started, how to have a resilient environment based on what they had, if they could leverage what they already had to make it better, that sort of thing. So the client executive for that account reached out to us. We completed the assessment, let's say on a Monday, and they wanted the results fairly quickly because of the RFP. So we delivered the results, let's say on a Thursday, more or less, of that same week. We went through the results. We figured out that probably air gapping would be one of our biggest recommendations, as well as multiple best practices and maybe some other conversations in some other areas. But the air gap really resonated with the customer. And, we followed up with one of those workshops, like I showed earlier, where we got the customer together with our experts, went over their environment, their needs, and we pretty much tailored a solution for them. That pretty much led to us winning that RFP that they had in place for some DS8s, since they wanted to leverage safeguarded copy with those. And that was a huge win for us, big win for the customer. And now we're talking about, expanding that air gap capability through some tape in the near future. So again, win-win for the customer and of course for us as well.
Yeah, and this seems like a great tool to simplify, I guess, because our portfolio is so vast, and it can be complicated and kind of daunting sometimes. This seems like a great vehicle to assess the environment at a fairly high level, kind of at a macro level, and then hone in on recommendations for specific technologies and solutions and best practices, and kind of cut through a lot of the noise. So that's very cool, and it's also speaking directly to the number one challenge I think that most organizations are facing right now. So very cool.
Yeah, thank you.
And Juan Carlo, how many of these have we done?
We've done about 20, probably 15 of them in the US, and then 5 of them in Europe. We have a couple in Germany, a couple in Denmark, Finland. We're working with some in Dubai, some in Hong Kong. So it's getting a lot of traction, internationally.
So a good sample size. And do you have any maybe, I don't know, feedback, best practices? Do you see any things that pop up over and over again that clients just, oh, geez, I wish I did this better? That seems to be consistent among all the clients,
Yeah,
or is it
I was gonna ask that too. Are there patterns that emerge within the results that you're seeing? Yeah,
no, definitely. The biggest one, of course, would be air gap again. I'm seeing a lot of interest on that and not a lot of action, if that makes sense. So yeah, we're trying to help clients, get to that air gap. But a couple other things I noticed too on the assessment is a lot of customers are curious about their backups, right? Everybody's backing up, but they're not sure how good those backups are, or they struggle to identify a good copy within those backups where they can come back from that is going to be clean, malware free, and not cause any follow-on problems, right? So that's a big one. And of course, we can walk them through best practices like, always come back to a testing or sandbox environments, check everything out in there, run your malware scans, check for corruption, make sure everything looks good, and then move to production. But that seems to be a big hit with customers too. They're all interested in a solution that can provide that, or best practices that can help them out in that realm.
How are clients doing with things like the recovery in a clean room? I keep hearing that come up a lot. A lot of clients you deal with have these clean rooms or these isolated environments, or is that another thing folks need to think about?
Yeah, that's definitely something they need to start thinking about. I know, for example, Gartner is starting to recommend that as well. You know, we're hearing a lot of buzz about that, just since it's such a good best practice, but you need to be set up for it. You typically don't think about those things until you need them, right? So again, having these conversations, noticing those gaps with the customers can help us take them in the right direction and, you know, get those things up before they need them.
And one of the people, Dan Thompson, who I saw on that sample agenda you had, he actually put together a video that's out on the YouTube that talks about the top 10 things that a Spectrum Protect environment can do to keep their environment safe. And I'm sure a lot of those are being incorporated into your assessment. So if someone hasn't been able to take an assessment yet, they can go and check out that YouTube.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. I mean, the air gap workshop was an example. We could do a Spectrum Protect hardening workshop. I mean, it really could be anything that the customer needs and wants, and we'll get the right experts for that. And of course, we'll know what to talk about because the assessment will tell us what needs and gaps are in that environment.
Now, is the assessment only in English or is it multilingual?
Right now, it's only in English, and yeah, I've been asked to get it translated to other languages, but that's still a work in progress.
I was going to say, I would imagine I've done probably hundreds of assessments in my life, not on this particular topic, but others. And I always used to find that one of the biggest advantages of those are communication amongst a group of people that you're running the assessment for, right? I mean, by doing this assessment, you're starting with a common framework, and hopefully, I assume when you present the results, you're presenting them to the entire group of people who participated in the assessment. So kind of everybody could be on the same page with regard to the results, and at least have a starting point to move forward.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I would even take it further. It helps out to answer the questions with the customer because, you know, especially when we have a big crowd in place from the customer side, right? If we have the whole storage team, sometimes we get disparate answers, right? One side of the team will say, oh, yeah, we absolutely do that. Then the other team will say, maybe we don't, right? So it helps us, you know, go deeper and find really.
Yeah, it's like couples counseling for the entire IT infrastructure team. Yep.
Exactly. Yeah.
Trisha, you started bringing up a good topic around what the stuff that Dan Thompson does, and I do encourage folks to do that. The other thing we've talked a lot about in a lot of the conversations I've had with clients, and again, irrespective of it, whatever your products are, our tech support team does probably about one cyber incident response per week for a new client because it's just so vastly happening, as Randy often talks about. And some of the best practices that have come down from that, I think we should enumerate because I think they're good thoughts, right? Folks that our support team finds that folks that do some of the following things end up recovering the fastest. And ultimately, that's what you want. You want your business back into production, helping you to make money. So protecting your LDAP or Active Directory and actually keeping that separate as a separate piece of backup from your primary backup. So you can get the way to connect to your environment back first and then start getting everything back. Juan Carlos talked about air gapping, and there's tape for true air gap. There's cloud and immutable storage for logical air gapping. And again, depending on your needs, that's very important. We talk about practicing the 3-2-1-1 backup methodology, 3 copies of your data, 2 media types, 1 offline and 1 offsite. And then practice in classifying your data, right? So we talk about classifying a lot, and we also talk a lot about the practice, because a cyber attack is much like a disaster, right? If you have an attack, you have a disaster. So just like your disaster recovery plan requires practicing so you know you can recover the business, I think this does as well.
That first one is very interesting, actually, because, you know, I mean, it's one of those things where you hear a lot about these ransomware attacking Active Directory / LDAP, And if you kind of think about it, right? I mean, if you can't log on to your systems, you can't do anything, right?
Yeah, that's
You're
a
finished.
that's a pretty desirable attack vector. If I'm a bad guy, like that's something I'm going to want to go
Right.
after.
But the thing about keeping that those protected backups on separate media or in a separate location, that's actually something that's relatively easy to implement and not that costly, right? So I mean, to me, that's a very good idea. Yeah, I really like that.
Hey, Juan Carlo, before I forget, right? If we talked about if a client wants to be able to do this, they should reach out to their business partner rep or their IBM rep to get this. But is there a place online that folks can go to get access to this? Because I do know you can take this by yourself. We recommend that you do it in conjunction with a team that kind of has an independent view and kind of can ask some detailed questions. But can folks get to it themselves?
So I believe right now it's available on the resiliency website on IBM. I'll have to double check on that, but we're also working on a pretty much an automated assessment for the customers to go through and get results immediately. So that'll be coming out soon.
Any other words of advice around the assessment, Juan Carlo?
I just think everybody should do it. It's a great way to identify where to get started, figure out what your strengths, weaknesses, any gaps in the environment are. And most of the time, it's great feedback. It's helped us get better relationships with our customers. It sets us up as the trusted advisors, and it's very well respected with our customers. It usually makes them look good, and they like it.
And I mean, IBM has a pretty dazzling reputation from a security perspective in general, right? I mean, we've got a great security business unit in practice, and set of best practices and policies and offerings, and this is just another one of them. So I think it really also helps to carry the brand flag for resiliency and the importance of resiliency and assessment. So it's a great tool.
Thank you.
Yeah, where else can you get something that is no cost and provide you some insight to your business, especially today when that's something everybody's looking for, especially something that's so important around just protecting your business.
Yeah, cheap insurance.
Great. Juan Carlo, I want to thank you very, very much for giving us some insight to this, and more importantly, giving our clients some insight to this. We talk a lot to our sellers about, hey, you should go out and talk to folks about this, and it's important. But I think making this more well known to clients is really, really important. So I thank you for sharing the information.
Yeah, and remember, air gap. Everybody should air gap.
Everybody should air gap.
Do it.
So Trisha, you know what time it is?
Yes, awesome.
It's tool time.
Tool time. Trisha's tool time. That's my favorite part.
So today's tool tip is SWAT team. And this is also another great team, just like Juan Carlos' team, that can add to your customers' satisfaction. What they do is if you are an IBMer or if you're a business partner, you can contact them through your IBMer, and they will go in and help you with proof of concepts. They'll help you with performance analysis. And if you have like really specific questions about hardware or all kinds of speeds and feeds, they are fantastic. I mean, they talk those terrible speeds, feeds, performance numbers, and everything else. So this is a really great tool to engage if you need that extra eyes on making sure the solution, perhaps even the solution that comes out of this type of assessment, is working and getting the performance needed. And you can check out the link that Steve will paste in to access that.
I was just going to ask you, how do we get in touch with these folks? So I will definitely put a link in the video.
Awesome. So we've got the bases covered.
We do.
It's good to know. In these trying times, that's good to know.
All right. Well, hey, for our 25th anniversary edition, I think we did pretty well.
It's a good one.
We had a good set of giveaways, some free assessments, and some capabilities clients can use to be able to better their environment when it comes to protecting their environment. And that's what we're all about here on the Data Resilience SpectrumCast. So
I think we got to start thinking about merch. If we get to 50, we should probably have a merch store. We'll talk about that.
We should probably have a merch store. Mugs.
Absolutely.
Great. Okay, so with that, I want to thank everyone and have a wonderful day.
Thanks, Juan Carlo. Appreciate it.